the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
As you can tell, last year it was an off year. But we reloaded and now it is our boss year. A Devo back there, and yeah, we got the badger. Don't forget Marshawn and don't forget the pass rush. Jameis QB1 dropping down to MT. Ball handed off the Alvin with the quick feet. So when you see the Saints marching, yeah, we gon' trouble you. At the Super Bowl party, eating on them double. We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast. As you can see, this one is a little bit different than the other ones. Beyond excited to announce that Mike Triplett is joining our staff full-time. He'll be on the podcast 3 times a week, writing on the website. Mike, thank you so much for being here. You've been here before, but this is the best. This is the best time.
Well, you know, those other times I was a guest on the pod, I was like, you know. It was a little test drive, and I was like, I like it. I like the way this car drives.
I think Kevin maybe saw the tea leaves a little bit before
Kevin
us.
is still part of this. I am not replacing
absolutely.
Kevin. We should have flown him in for this just to make it clear. On the band T-shirt poster, I am not standing in front of him. You know, like no arguments.
Yeah, so it will be a little bit different. Our podcast schedule will be going Tuesdays at 12:30. That'll be live. It'll be on YouTube. You can watch it whenever you want. We'll be going live every Thursday now, and we will only have the members-only post-game Sundays after the games. Me and Mike will talk about what we're seeing there. Kevin will be a part of everything we're doing, so no worries there. And also excited for the very first time in the real Better Call Bado podcast studio. We got a beautiful painting by Jay Frost. We're making some moves around here. So as always, we're presented by Dat Wrap Company. And if you need your car wrapped, you want to look like Batman, get your car blacked out or anything, go hit them up. They are the people to do that job for you. And they can help you grow your business with the most cost-effective form of advertising. They specialize in graphic design, custom and commercial vehicle wraps, wall murals, and storefront signage. Whether you're wanting to give your car a fresh new look or you want to transform the face of your business, DWC can help get you noticed. Call today, 985-237-4781. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime and Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call Bado at 504-323-4777 or 985-677-1085 for your free consultation and case review. And as always, hit up our guys, Firehouse Subs, Veterans Boulevard location. They are sponsoring kind of what we're going on here. They're going to have a giveaway a little bit later today, so keep an eye out on the NOF Network Twitter for that. So I've been waiting a whole training camp to have these conversations with you. So we got a lot of catching up to do. Let's start with the CJ Gardner-Johnson trade, because I think you got some interesting thoughts on it. It's kind of a topic where I think seeing what was happening at practice and kind of having a little bit more of a behind the scenes look actually mattered. There's a lot of times where people are like, I'm in the media, I know more. Like, I think that's BS a lot of times. But I think in this particular instance, maybe if you were there, it wasn't that much of a surprise when that trade happened.
Well, first of all, if you had had me on a week earlier, my top training camp observation was they were going to be awful in the first half of week one and then just absolute fire in the second half. So it's too bad I never got to get that take off. I don't know what we've actually learned about this team through week one, but I really liked your takeaway that was they may never go down 16 points again the whole rest of the season, but they finally have a team that is built to potentially come back in a situation like that with all the weapons they have on offense now, which was not the case last year. If this team ever got it down by 16 last year, you left the stadium and the Buffalo Bills fans filled the lower bowl. That's not the case anymore with this team. But yeah, CJ Gardner-Johnson, now look, he's the first person you brought up which it's Tampa Bay Buccaneers week. So that's
Yep.
a really valid question, because I definitely see us. Look, Tom Brady is overdue to have some success against the Saints. And if he does have success, that's the first thing everyone's going to point to is this wouldn't have happened on CJ's watch. So they're rolling the dice a lot with all the changes they made in the secondary. They let Marcus Williams go. They let CJ Gardner-Johnson go. Obviously, Malcolm Jenkins retired, and Paulson Adebo, we don't know what's going on with his injury status right now. So this is a very different looking secondary that is going to have to try to maintain that success. And if they don't, a lot of people are going to be pointing to that decision. But yeah, my first takeaway with CJ Gardner-Johnson is when I saw that he was traded, I wasn't shocked. We've seen a lot of signs building up to it. I did not ever think they were actually going to come to agreement on a long-term contract. And you can trace back to drafting Alontae Taylor in the second round, signing Tyrann Mathieu to a multi-year deal that, okay, they're putting some pieces in place to absorb the loss, the future loss of CJ Gardner-Johnson. I did not think it was going to happen necessarily right away. But I thought if they were going to trade him, they would get a lot more. So as soon as the second information comes and they're getting a fifth and a sixth, my immediate thought was, oh, they just cut him. Like they didn't trade him for value. I mean, fifth and sixth round picks are not important to the Saints as we've seen in their history. Those guys don't even often make the team. This is not a franchise that values third day draft picks. They got what they could for him when they decided they wanted to move on to him. That's plain and simple. Almost there was so much backlash about what a bad trade it was that they almost should have just released him. So the question was, oh no, why did they decide they had, instead of all the backlash being, oh, they're terrible at making trades. Don't they realize there's more value? They clearly decided that in their minds it was going to be addition by subtraction. And here's the thing. It reminds me a lot of a move we debated once years ago, Akeem Hicks.
Oh, yeah.
They got nothing in return for Akeem Hicks. They decided they wanted to move on. And I wrote at the time, and I kind of feel the same way about CJ Gardner-Johnson. It's a shame it had to go this way, because that's a player that's going to continue to have success in this league. And for years, people are going to be like, man, I can't believe the Saints let that guy go away. He could have a very good career, but that doesn't mean the Saints are wrong. They decided that whatever was poisoning the well, and I think a lot had to do with their contract talks, they decided, let's move on without him.
Well, look, first of all, they got Who-Man in the 3 tight end set for Akeem Hicks, and that actually did help that season, which is kind of crazy. It set up so many deep plays to Brandon Cooks, and that was one of the good things they were doing that year. But yeah, I agree. It was definitely felt like something where they felt they needed to get him out of the building. The whole league knew they wanted to get him out of the building. And unfortunately, fair or not, this is a guy that dropped to the 4th round, and then he becomes available because things aren't going well, and that just becomes confirmation bias at that point. Oh, everything we thought about this guy was right. I think they're going to miss him a little bit. I think maybe this is a game, especially one where you kind of give him that attitude. And I think he did give them a piece of that. But I do think there are other strong leaders on this team that can kind of give them the same thing. And one of the things the fans were talking about during the first half of the last game was, well, Chauncey's gone, so this is why this is happening. Like, I think it would have been the same result. Now, granted, I thought Justin Evans could have done a little bit better defending the run, and CJ would have been an improvement there. But they're going to find ways to get around that. And I think they just need time, both sides of the ball, to gel a little bit and look the way they're going to look. So that's next topic. I mean, you look at the way they started last week, the way they finished. I don't think it's either end. I think they aren't as good as they finished. No. They aren't as bad as they started.
Yeah.
Where do you think the offense kind of exists? And do you have any types of concerns going into this week against Tampa Bay?
Well, my concern is the defensive side of the ball. I think this is a great defense. The Saints have a great defense. My sort of season-long concern, I should say. We've all been operating. I think we all in the local media, more than the national media even, are bullish on the Saints. Think they're a playoff team, think they could contend for the division. And we all look at it like this team was 9-8 last year when they had absolute zero offense and every injury and COVID and everything that could, and hurricane and everything that could go wrong. They've got to be better. The one area of the team that I don't think can be better this year is the defense. But I think the second half of last season, they might have been the best defense in the NFL. So we need to see the defensive line be just as good. When Marcus Davenport was playing some of the best football of his career last year, Cam Jordan, obviously, still fighting off father time the way he was playing down the stretch last year. And as we just said, if if Paulson Adebo doesn't play this week, they're going against Tampa Bay with 4 new defensive backs out of their top 5 guys beyond Marshawn Lattimore than they had in all those matchups where they did so well. So can they maintain that greatness on defense? And do they need to? Is this a playoff team if they have the 10th best defense in the league? Or do they need to have a top 4 defense to be a playoff team? The offense you have to feel great about. I mean, they were almost a playoff team with 0 offense last year, and now they have an offense that this offense might be top 10 in the NFL suddenly overnight. I mean, it's going to take, we've said all along, we need to see if Jameis Winston can thrive with Alvin Kamara. We didn't see that yet in the first game because he's never thrown to a running back like that consistently in his career. Can he thrive with Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry, guys who've worked the short and intermediate area of the field? But one thing we did see is maybe those guys will do more down the field than they've done with Jameis. It definitely was true with Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, I think there's some like Anquan Bolden type ability with both those guys, just going down the field, using their catch radiuses and their physicality to go up and make contested catches that are deeper and more intermediate. And Mike did a lot of that in 2016 too. And then the offense just kind of
I never forget that play in San Francisco.
Oh,
this might still be the best play of his career.
It's up there, no question. I think it's interesting that you're worried about the defense more than the offense. I think I might actually be the other way. I think there's still a lot of things they got to answer.
Well, I shouldn't say that. I think we all know that the offense is going to be 200% better this year or 300% better this year than it was last year. I don't think that means they'll be better than the defense. I'm just saying the only area of this team that could potentially drop off is the defense. That's
I agree with that. 100%.
I am not worried by what I saw from the run game. That was a weird. We're worried about Marcus Mariota game plan. They, as you said in your film study, they didn't even blitz once.
Yeah,
that's not going to be the same. We're not going to see them approach another team like this until we get to Philadelphia week, and they are still scratching their heads like, all right, we got to come up with something. But,
or Atlanta again, or Arizona possibly too is another one that could weirdly be tough on them. Yeah, I mean, look, the one thing I liked about the defense is they were organized, and when they made changes to bringing in Malcolm Jenkins and some other guys before, like it took a few weeks then. This time, there really wasn't any coverage bust. There was one, Marcus May chased a guy down, got the PI. I don't think that play was actually on him. So to really only have one moment speaks well to the communication they already have in place. So I think it's something, well, they'll be okay there. But I agree. Yeah, I mean, there's really nowhere for them to, either they stay the same or get worse. It would be really hard for them to improve and get better. But I think there might be more playmaking ability. I think we saw some of that already. I really like the way Marcus May tackles and attacks in the box.
He was a standout that first game. I thought Pete Werner, you could almost say is a boost because the Pete Werner that they had last year was he missed some time and he was a rookie. That's definitely an area where they've improved.
Yeah, he's a better linebacker than Quan. I'm sorry, like they made that decision for a reason. And DA said it yesterday. Like he's a guy that's just always in the right place at the right time, and that's what you need to play good, solid defense. And I think some of the guys they've gotten rid of recently maybe don't fit that ethos. So if you can be organized, and DeMario Davis isn't thinking about how do I overcompensate, or because Quan's overcompensating and trying to do too much, I think it's just easier to play in those spots when those guys are in the right place at the right time. And Pete made 2 huge plays. He had to stop on Mariota on that run. He forced the fumble on a pass he gave up. Shouldn't have been on Zacchaeus anyhow. But I think that's definitely an upgrade spot for them. I am a little bit worried about the run defense, though. And I think that's the one thing we take for granted, that they're always going to be good against the run. And at some point, like, do you have the defensive tackles to hold the point of attack and get your linebackers into these areas where they can flow in that? Right now, I think that's definitely a questionable thing.
Well, one thing that I think was a hidden reason for optimism is I think that David Onyemata should be better this year than he was last year. That's one area of that front seven that should be better this year than it was last year, because he had that lost season with the suspension and then coming back and never really finding his groove. And from people we talked to in training camp, it sounded like, oh yeah, David Onyemata is back this year. So that has a chance to show up. I mean, Peyton Turner can only go up from his rookie year. They certainly have the depth. They had Tano Passignon was healthy and active.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're going to run out of bodies. I think Kentavious Street has been a good addition. So I in general feel good. But the guys who have to be special are Cam Jordan and Marcus Davenport, and they are special. But those are 2 guys who are going to have trouble being better this year than they were last year when they were playing at their absolute peak.
Where do you fall on Peyton Turner right now? Do you feel like what's your
this
general
is how
thought?
I've always felt about Peyton Turner. If they would have just drafted him 40th or 50th, everybody would be excited about him. But because he has to live up to first round billing, everyone, is ready to pounce on him and call him a bust. But he's going to be a positive. He's always going to be in that rotation. Whether he ever reaches Marcus Davenport or Cam Jordan levels remains to be seen. But he's, if it wasn't for the expectations he's saddled with, he's a super talented guy who has definitely unique skills that we can see on the practice field and that will continue to show up. I remember talking to Zach Streif about how slippery he is. He said nobody can get a clean block on him because of the way he moves, and he's going to be an asset. Is he going to be a rotational guy or is he going to be a starter? I don't know that, but it's good to have him on the team.
Yeah, people need to give him space to develop. He's played 7 or 8 games in his whole NFL career. That's way too soon to jump to a conclusion. And I get it. Like he's been injured. You haven't quite seen everything you want to see, but it's way, way, way too soon to even be having those types of conversations. So,
well, and just follow up on what you're saying about their run defense. I wrote this when they drafted him, and I think I wrote this when they drafted Marcus Davenport, and a ton of other moves they've made. You can't have one with the other. I think people want them to draft these edge rushers that turn into TJ Watt. And that's just not what the Saints do. They want them to be 6'5", 300 pounds. And they keep doing that over and over again. And it's not a coincidence that that's how they draft their defensive line talent and their linebackers for that reason, for that matter, and keep having the number 1 run defense in the NFL. The two go hand in hand. And I think he will continue to be a part of that as well.
I think my second biggest concern with the team right now, outside of defensive tackle, and I think that'll get better when Roach comes back. He was outstanding the whole entire summer, like low key, like one of the 4 or 5 guys I would have bet on like my MVP list of training camp. I thought he made that many plays. That's a big billing to put on him to live up to, but like he really, really looked good, dominated the Green Bay practices. I think my biggest concern right now, though, I think tight ends alleviated for me. I think Juwan Johnson, like emergence is kind of, covered that up a little bit. Taysom had a couple of huge plays quietly. Like that position was dominant for them in the last game. Running back, I'm a little bit worried about running back overall. A, just the depth of the group. B, how everybody's going to get involved. I don't think Alvin's probably ever going to have the same passing numbers that he had throughout his career. And I also think his injury might be a little bit more sketchy than some of us think. Like I think Sunday's up in the air a little bit, but even long term, I still think that's a position where they need to get something going and maybe answer some of the doubts.
Yeah, I mean, Alvin's such a special player
behind him.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Mark Ingram, although he's already limited in practice in week 1, which you don't like to see, especially for someone his age, and he did get a little dinged up last year, even when he was doing well for the Saints. But I mean, I like him as much as a lot of number 2 running backs. If Tony Jones Jr. never makes that leap from looking great in the preseason to the regular season, he obviously was competing with a lot of guys to be that number 3 guy. And then Latavius Murray comes back. I don't know what to expect from him, but it's just a reminder of who's always available. I mean, last year, Latavius Murray and Devontae Freeman go to the Ravens. So that's a position that is never going to scare me. But the only question is Alvin a top 3 player on the team like he's always been? But if Alvin has like an injury-plagued season or misses time, then it becomes a concern. But I don't get too worked up about backup running back depth, but I will be if Alvin's not. Nobody can replace Alvin.
There's no question he's top 3 talent on the team, and he's going to be that every year. It's just a matter of are they going to get him the opportunities to prove?
And you do worry about that because he's not as effective. Like last year, as we saw, he will touch he is the offense. Last year he was the offense. Now they have a lot of other guys, but he will touch the ball as much as any running back in the league. But it's way better, obviously, when he was catching it and getting. I mean, obviously, the 2017 season, didn't he break the NFL record for yards per touch? Then when he's just running into the line and the line's not run blocking that well, you don't want to turn him into an ordinary running back.
Yeah, the one thing I don't necessarily like last year, it kind of felt like they ran him between the tackles too much. Week 1, it felt like there was too much of that. Mark's kind of hitting some runs on the outside. I'd like to see that flip. I'd rather have Alvin out in space, not taking these hits. And I think when he's in space against people and he can break tackles and kind of do all the things that make him special, you see those special moments, and that's what makes him really good. Kind of using him like Derrick Henry has been a little bit surprising me the last few years. Last year, I think it was necessary because that's all they could really do. Yeah, you couldn't really spread anybody out and make it believable. But now that they have this offense that they have, I think it should start to get.
And I completely ignore last year because look, we talked about
you should ignore last year.
Their receivers. We talked about they had no receivers, and then eventually they had no quarterback. But the secret one to me, and Sean Payton talked about it all the time, when he lost his offensive, when he lost both Ramczyk and Armstead, not to mention Pete being gone in the middle, it's like, when I don't have an offensive line, like I look at my play sheet and nothing's going to work. And that's what we saw last year. But I also can throw out the second half of game one a little bit because they didn't run, they had to abandon the run. I mean, we're not going to see another game all season where they're in hurry up for the entire final 20 minutes of the game like they were, which also skewed, I think, the tight end, like Adam Troutman's usage versus Juwan Johnson. That's not going to continue. Adam Troutman will be in on run plays. They just had no run plays.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That usage was definitely fourth quarter influence, but I still think that Juwan's taking snaps from everybody.
Question.
Like he blocked really well. I
Yeah,
thought it was
you pointed that out in your film study, and Jameis Winston said the same thing. It was his first thing, even though Juwan caught those big time passes. The first thing Jameis said is how much he's developed at the line of scrimmage,
and that's what's going to keep him on the field. Like last year, he was inactive a bunch of games, despite I think being far and away their best receiving threat at tight end. But like if it's one dimensional, it gets a little bit hard to play a guy in a game where you're kind of viewing a more two-dimensional approach. Going back to training camp, who was the one guy? We never got your take on this. So who was your one guy? Like who was the one guy that rose the most?
Yeah, well, I voted for Paulson Adebo, which is a shame that we might not see him 2 weeks in a row. To be determined this week, but he wasn't there Wednesday.
He was walking fine in the locker room.
I thought we were going to see him in week one.
Just the way he acted in his locker that one day,
but obviously they didn't put him on IR, so they don't expect him to miss, the whole month. So he'll be back soon. This would be a nice game to have him back for, though. But he was the answer because to me, I actually thought going back to the offseason, Bradley Roby might beat him out. Like maybe he played over his skis last year, and Bradley Roby's the professional with the resume, and maybe that'll be an open competition. And instead, Adebo just dominated training camp and made no doubt like, oh, you guys thought I overachieved my year? No, I did, but I'm going to also take a second year leap from that. So I'm really excited to see him play. I mean, the other guy I would have voted for. It's every training camp. It's funny that we skipped through training camp. We would have wasted a lot of breath on like over evaluating the guys who were fighting for the 48th roster spot. Kirk Merritt's obviously a guy who had a fantastic training camp, might go on to have a very good career. Could be the next Juwan Johnson, Marquez Callaway, who, first year they got on the roster, the next year they took a step up and roll. But, all the other guys who were like candidate for MVP we were talking about were guys just trying to make the roster. And then game day shows up and it's like, oh no, they've got Jarvis Landry, Michael Thomas, and Chris Olave. So those other receivers, it's going to take a lot to get them on the field. But, one of the other guys we were talking about for MVP was Alvin. Alvin looked great all summer. So I, in no way am going to think a quiet first game is a sign of things to come. But hopefully health is not an issue for him.
Yeah, and not having a Debo is a much bigger deal when you see Julio looking sort of like old Julio.
Yeah.
Like he played a really good game. There was one pass where he didn't catch that. I was like, he would have caught that in Atlanta. But like overall, he looked like he found something in week one. Maybe that's not all the way there, but this is a team with like a lot of good weapons. Then if Gage is playing, like there's just a lot of ways that they can get.
Yeah, Chris Godwin seems like he might not play, which will that's where you really would miss CJ Gardner-Johnson. He's done his best work in his career against Chris Godwin. So if the Saints lose Gardner-Johnson, they lose Chris Godwin, then maybe maybe that's a wash.
Godwin definitely got him one game, but he has played. He plays well against Tampa overall. He gets himself fired up, and all that stuff. So that's definitely something. With the Debo, I think my only question with him, I think he answered a lot of stuff, and we're going to see the growth. My one concern with him still is like, does he ride that line too close? Like the physicality is definitely something where you were looking at him in camp, like, what do you got in the way with that? And then the officials are there, and he was getting away with it. But I think that's the one thing throughout his career is he's always going to like ride that line of maybe going a little too far, and depending on how a game's called, some of that stuff might come back to get him. But I think he's going to be if they do maintain their level on defense, I think he's going to be a huge part of that. And I think Pete Werner too. Like both those guys have just taken, it seemed like during camp, really big leaps forward. Pete, I think, showed some of that week one. Obviously has to keep doing it. But I think those two guys will be a big part of that. So kind of like a inside media thing here a little bit. Like what's been just kind of your biggest takeaway, DA being at camp instead of Sean, and just the vibe in general and just how things go?
My biggest is I forget every once in a while that Sean Payton's not there anymore. Like it's the same. It's 100% the same. I'm sure it's different behind closed doors. And Catherine Terrell did talked with DA for a story last week where he pointed out he's the reverse of Sean Payton. He's more intense during the week and then not as intense on game day, whereas Sean Payton was famous game day Sean on Sunday yelling at everyone. So maybe DA's calmness helped when they're coming back from a 16-point deficit. But I mean, honestly, like, and I talked to Dennis Allen this summer, and it was just like, I'm not going to come in here and change things just for the sake of change, because players see that and they see right through that. I'm not going to be like, hey, all your lockers moved and all the signs are different. And Sean Payton did a lot of that when he showed up here, but he wanted to do that when he changed the color of the uniforms they were wearing at home games. He changed the signs in the locker. Like, he was like, change everything you can because it's a new culture and we're not the same team. Dennis Allen's approach has been the exact opposite. He said, we've all built this together. We're proud of what we've built. Yeah. You guys were a part of it. And I want you to know that we believe in everything you've been doing and we're going to continue to do it. So every change to me is subtle.
Yeah, I think just in general, like it's more vibe stuff than anything visual. Like, guys seem more comfortable. They seem a little bit looser. Cam Jordan had a tweet.
That's inside media. That's just the media that feels more comfortable.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, for sure. But even Cam had a tweet the other day, just like less restrictions, more fun. Like, I think there's just like a little bit more like looseness is the word I'd put. And I think maybe in hindsight, and this might be unfair to say because there's a long season to go, and this might like blow up in my face for saying this, but I think kind of seeing it and having the feel, and then just kind of seeing how people are just kind of a little bit more relaxed, like. It almost feels like a needed change, like, and the postscript looking at it from a distance, and I think that's good for this team where they're at too. They're a veteran team. Like, I don't think Mark Ingram needs to be like feeling squeezed down. Like, it's an older team. They're able to handle this, and I think that I think some of that stuff was definitely needed overall. I think it's helped with Mike Thomas too a little bit. Mike seems to be extremely like bought in to the program right now, and I think that's a huge thing for this team. And if they are going to be successful, if their defense does maybe fall down to 10th and the offense needs to rise, he's going to be a huge part of that. So, I mean, I think him being bought in and being happy.
The buy-in is definitely true. I don't know how much of that we can point to a coaching change.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to suggest that at all.
I know we can point to a ton of, I think there was just a 2021, throw it in the trash and move on. Like, this was a team that definitely showed up for OTAs. So glad that it wasn't 2021 anymore. I mean, that was such a lost season, especially for the guys who were still in the peak or toward the end of the peak of their careers. And they were like, we missed out on one, because if things had gone a different way last year, that could have been they played well enough in a lot of areas to be a 13-win team if they had an average offense and didn't set the NFL record for starters or players lost to injuries and COVID. But another vibe thing that I brought up and something I'm going to write about probably this week is Jarvis Landry.
Oh, man.
You mentioned Mark Ingram, who has always been such a vibe guy in that locker room, and it was so huge when they brought him back. Jarvis Landry knows a lot of these guys from being in the same circles over the years, but he just showed up and he already feels like the heart and soul of this team. And he was the one right after the game, like with his arm around Dennis Allen walking off the field, like, I told you, you told us, we knew. Like, and I'm like, how did that happen so quick? And how was he still available? What team doesn't want that on their team?
I said this the other day somewhere, maybe on T-Bob's show. Like, he already earned his $3 million. He won in the game. Like, I don't know how much a win is worth, but it's worth close to $3 million. So everything he does from here is just icing on the cake. And I think he's going to be really good. I think he fits really well. I think he's happy to be here. He's healthy. All that stuff really, really matters. And again, like, going back to Mike, outside of the coach and all that stuff, like, just in general, he seems to be a lot happier in a lot better place, seems to be thankful about his situation. And I do think that his like buy-in on DA is important and just kind of helping set that culture too.
He's like, making an obvious effort. I mean, that's the story I wrote about him.
Great story too.
That
don't know where that was published though.
No, former, but he, like, without question, he is making a concerted effort to be like, all right, I missed a lot of time. He said it a few times. I know my team needed me. Whatever happened in the past, whether it was overblown or whether it was a serious rift, or, whether, issues will come up again because he's an intense personality, obviously. But he has decided, I'm making an effort to be all in, to be more open, to be more positive, to be more invested. You absolutely see that with him.
Oh, here's a text message question for you. Yeah. So I might be setting you up a little bit, but Do you think that having two guys with that kind of catch radius that like Jameis can really trust to kind of just put the ball around him to go up and get it once he's fully comfortable with them? Do you think that helps him, or do you think that leads to mistakes, or is it a little bit of both?
Oh, that's a good question, but I mean, he might make that throw. I mean, last year we saw him making that throw to receivers who needed it to be put inside their pocket for it to be a completed pass. So catch radius can only help.
I think it will help him too, and I think we
I don't think it'll make him be too like, hey, I just throw this up and one of those guys is going to catch it. I don't worry about that.
I mean, but that's a narrative that would probably exist somewhere. But I don't buy that either.
But, the bad narratives. Look, everything's gravy because they pulled out a game that they don't win 99 times out of 100. I mean, this would have been a doomsday week 1 podcast if they don't pull that game out. But the two narratives that are looming, people will pounce on DA if this team is 2-3. All those things I said about how he didn't change anything. Well, it's just because they tried to keep the whole thing together without Sean Payton. And Jameis, he can have 5 games in a row like this. He did last year. But the first one with 3 interceptions, people will pounce. So I think he's going to have to deal with that and let that bounce off his shoulder for the rest of his career, probably.
I think there's a handful of things he needs to clean up, and I think you watch that game, and maybe in the first half he needs to get like a little bit more comfortable. I think
without question,
some of that stuff will come with as Drew used to say, time on task and all that stuff. I think he's actually going to have a decent season though. Like I don't see like the downsides that the national media has, the narrative and all that stuff. Like there's not going to be a disaster season. He's going to be okay or better.
Right.
And he was already better than okay.
Well, here's what I always said about Jameis, and I'm going to pat myself on the back for this one is at the very least, there's that level that he's in. You could say it starts as high as, Ryan Tannehill and Kirk Cousins, or you can say it's down to, whatever, the Andy Dalton or, Zach Wilson, or I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to rank them all right now, but he's in this middle pocket of quarterbacks who, if you have a good team, you can win with him. But he also has in his back pocket, if you're down and you need a playmaking quarterback, that is something this team was definitely missing last year. If you need instant offense, if you need someone who can have a one-play touchdown drive with a 71-yard pass to Deontay Hardy or something, you know what I mean? Now you've got that element too. So I think he can play that. I think he can play that smart game, which is I've got Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, or we can punt and I've got this defense. I think he can play that game. But then if there's we're down by 2 touchdowns, Jameis, we need you to go into hurry up in the whole second half and make some plays. He's got that too. So that's a really great combination.
I thought that was really important, seeing him lead those drives and everything. And some of it was like the first one, I thought the Falcons were playing kind of like a prevent defense vanilla, and they tore it up the way they were supposed to. But then when they started doing stuff on that, like he was reading the safeties, making the right throws, and he just kind of really got into his element there. And outside of there was that one play where they double blitzed the gap and he almost threw the interception on the pass to Juwan. Outside of that, like it was impeccable and like up there with anything Drew ever did running the 2-minute. Like it looked the same as fluid. The big throws were extremely impressive. That throw to Jarvis was unbelievable. That thing went 53 yards through the air and like he put it perfectly in between like the safeties crashing down, the cornerbacks there. Like if he went up the sideline anymore with it, like it might not have gotten caught or worse, like perfectly placed ball. Like I thought that was huge for him. And I thought that 2-minute also was like humongous for Mike. Like if he went a whole week, like where it was like the one pass over the middle and then the slant that came behind him, Jameis Smith threw that slant. Like that would have been hard on him. Like I think he needed it mentally to know, like, all right, I'm still me. Like I'm that guy, and he had more than one of those plays, and I thought it was huge for him.
Yeah, my only concern with Jameis, and this is probably because I covered Drew Brees for too long, and I think this is how you're supposed to do it. But I also know that it's how Pete Carmichael and Sean Payton have always caught offense. Is the one area of his game that I don't know if he has is all right, Pete just drew up a 7-yard play.
Yeah,
I'm going to take a 3-step drop, throw it to Alvin, take my 7 yards. I'm going to take a 3-step drop, throw it to Mike, take my 7 yards. That's the play they called for this situation. That's all this is going to be. He stood in the pocket looking for something too much in the first half. And then I think the hurry up helped him because he had to be decisive and throw quick. But me and you were even texting about that at halftime, which is that first half was so ugly that we both thought we're going to see Pete Carmichael call a bunch of rhythm plays that are designed to be like, all right, let's get 5 yards. Let's get 7 yards.
Yep.
Let's get a first down. Let's stop having it be sacks and holding on to the ball too long and everything like that. And that did happen. But I don't I don't know yet how much of the part of it, and that goes back to, we used to see Alvin catch 80 passes. Will he catch 50 this year? Obviously, throwing slants to Mike Thomas is a hot button. He can be so much more than just a guy who catches slants, but that needs to be a part of the offense too. You got a lot of good pass catchers to take those free. We can have this is an offense that should have 7 yards anytime at once.
Mike should catch 20 slants this year, just like he does every single year. And if he doesn't, that's a failure of the offense overall. Like top to bottom, he's amazing on those plays. He should have a ton of hitches too, like crossing routes. All those things should be a huge part of this offense. But I also do think that like some of the stuff that Alvin should change. Like he shouldn't have 81 catches because the quarterback can throw down the field. Yeah. And that was a result of what they had to do. It wasn't because this is the best thing. What Drew had to do also happened to be like the two best things, throwing short passes to Mike and Alvin, but you can do more than that, and you can be more dynamic. So I just think 81 catches every year, like it was locked in literally every single season. Like that's done now, and I think that's okay. But yeah, when they came out at halftime, though, you were saying that, and you even tweeted about it, and they did before going to the 2 minute. They started doing some more rhythm stuff, and it started looking a little bit better. I don't think that stuff got where it needed to be, but it was a change in approach, and I thought that was a good thing to see Carmichael make that change.
And we're being way too positive because obviously probably the biggest concern of that whole game is we didn't see the improvement of the interior offensive line that we were hoping to, with Cesar Ruiz getting a full offseason year 3, Andrus Peat being back healthy. Both of them, I don't think, missed a practice all preseason. Coaches were saying good things, and in week 1 we saw Grady Jackson tear him up. So that is an area that needs to be a lot better. It will be better than it was in week 1, but how much better is a big question mark.
Yeah, look, Pete's Pete at this point. I think we know what he is. Like he had a handful of good plays too out in space, but he's gonna. There's just times where he's gonna lose a 1-on-1, and if Grady Jarrett gets him, he gets him, and that happens. Caesar is the guy that I'm kind of, it just has to improve. Like it can't keep going this direction, and if it does, at some point, like you got to look at it and make a decision. My biggest concern, and I think they'll fix this quickly. We saw the same thing last year. Like they played a team and they were blitzing the A gaps, and the Saints couldn't do anything to stop it. I can't remember what game it was, and it was just over and over and over. And they fixed it quickly. It was kind of felt the same way in this game.
Well, their worst last year was Carolina in week 2, but I don't know if that's when you're.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. So I think they'll come back, they'll fix it, and that stuff will be fine. Some of the identification issues will be better. Some of the blitz pickup by the running backs was a little bit iffy. Alvin having the rib situation kind of makes some of that make a little bit more sense. I thought some of Jameis's drops were a touch too deep. So I think there's just like a couple detailed things that come with just having preseason games, which they really didn't have.
We're going to be talking about this 12 months from now. I'm already writing down how many of us are going to ask DA and who's going to ask first. Do you think your starters should play more in the preseason after you guys got off to a slow start last year? That's a league-wide trend, though, and we saw a lot of ugly football in week 1 around the league. And maybe the preseason needs to get its mojo back because there's too many people ignoring the importance of playing in the preseason.
Yeah, that or they need more joint practices. And again, Jameis wasn't a part of those. So that's a huge part of it. But if you aren't going to play your guys, I think you should have a joint practice 1 or 2 before the game, and then everybody kind of works into shape that way. But it's definitely a thing. And like tackling is a little bit sloppy. That's definitely a thing. All of it. I think you saw everything with the Saints. And I think the Falcons are a team that kind of approached knowing like, all right, we're fighting for our lives. We got to figure things out. And teams that are in that place as opposed to teams that are kind of feeling good about where they're at, contenders, know what their starters are. There's definitely a difference between the quality of play. I think Monday Night Football was like the best example of it. Like Denver's a team that's supposed to be pretty good. They feel good about what they're doing. Seattle's kind of fighting for their lives, and they came in ready for a fight. And Denver looked like they got punched in the mouth.
Yeah, did I read right that Russell Wilson didn't play in the preseason? He's with a new team, a new coach, a new system, and even he didn't play. All right, the preseason needs. Preseason's getting too dumped on. Yeah, I didn't know if this is my debut on the podcast. Are we allowed to curse on this podcast? I know, but the preseason deserves a better reputation.
We're a PG-13 podcast. PG-13. Yeah. How you feel about this weekend? You think they'll be ready? You feel good about how they finish and how they'll enter this game?
I think the same thing I feel about this week that I feel about the whole season. I think the offense is going to be way better, and I'm like on the edge of my seat to watch this offense every time they take the field because there's more to come from Olave, there's more to come from Kamara, and there's still more to come from Thomas and more Taysom Hill. How did we not even talk about Taysom Hill? Yeah, there's so much more this offense can do. I'm so excited to watch it, but the defense now with all the changes in the secondary and with the defensive line that we haven't seen show up yet after that first game that was a little weird, their approach to the game, and the fact that Tom Brady and Tampa Bay are so overdue to finally have a good game. If they can continue their run of defensive success against Tom Brady, then first of all, Dennis Allen's set. Like if he starts 2-0 and he shuts down Tom Brady again with a new cast of characters, then his reputation takes 10 more notches up. But I don't like the idea. I don't want people to be too comfortable about this matchup and think, oh, the Saints always beat Tampa Bay. It's still as tough as it ever was to stop this team.
Yeah, if they start out 2-0, they're kind of playing with house money at that point. I hate that phrase, but if you start out 2-0, like you're in a really, really good place. If they can stop Brady again, like it's going to be the most amazing. Because they do it consistently. Like this isn't a 1 or 2 time thing. It's multiple times per year, and if you can take it into a third season
with different personnel, will be the biggest too. Like,
and against this guy, like he figures everything out, and the stuff that they're able to do against him. And you're right. I do think that this is one you don't take for granted. I think they could do it again. I think they have the players to do it, and I think even the switch up a little bit with the different types of safeties and all that kind of make it a little bit harder because there's unexpected. And we even saw some of it last week. Like you saw May and Tyron back there deep, and they're kind of both moving before the snap, and then which one's going, which one's staying. And it was just fascinating to see. Sometimes PJ's back there, Tyron's on the line. Like you can drop and move guys all over the place, and that's going to be really huge against him. That's how they beat him every other time. But yeah, with new guys and you're doing all these moving parts, you just feel a little bit more prone to something maybe breaking where before.
Well, and look, Marcus Williams got beat up as much as any great player on the Saints over the years because we only noticed him when he was doing something wrong, which happened every once in a while, missed tackle here and there. But the fact that this defense was so good from 2017 to 2021, while he was the safety net on the back end and nobody was beating him over the top, that is one thing I think you risk with those more aggressive safeties is getting beat over the top once in a while. So I think we'll see that once in a while. But as you say, there's going to be more of a playmaking element from that position as well.
All right, that's all I got. You got anything you want to add?
No, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah,
this is exciting, man. I was gonna do the hat. You got a hat, like the high school kid.
You got it on the chest,
but I took the. I mean, this really is the free gear. That was that was it. That was what put me over the top.
All right, so make sure you sign up for the site. We got a code right now, 20% off first payment. Use the code TRIP TRIP. That'll give you 20% off. And look, like I said on on Twitter before this, everything we're doing. It's going to stay the same pretty much, $9 a month. The price doesn't go up. It's just going to be more. Mike's going to be bringing his columns and analysis. I'm going to be doing the same stuff I've always been doing. Like I said, the only thing that changes, podcast schedule Tuesdays now at 12:30. Thursday, we will have a podcast there in the afternoon. Sundays, members only. Me and Trip are on those. Kevin will come in when he can and when it makes sense. But overall, it's same stuff, just more. And we... I kind of think we got the biggest free agent pickup in the offseason in New Orleans.
I know Jarvis won. I didn't earn $3 million yet.
I'm taking a trip. Anyways, thanks for supporting us. Everything we're doing is because of you guys. Your unbelievable support has fueled our growth. And when we launched the site, I wrote a story saying we would always reinvest in making the best product possible. It wasn't about money or anything else, and keeping our promise. So thanks for joining us, Mike and you guys, and we'll talk to you guys after the game.
We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
As you can tell, last year it was an off year. But we reloaded and now it is our boss year. A Devo back there and yeah, we got the badger. Don't forget my son and don't forget the pass rush. Jameis QB1 dropping down to MT. Handed off the Alvin with the quick feet. So when you see the Saints marching, yeah, we gon' trouble you. At the Super Bowl party eating on them double. We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev,